Sonic the Hedgehog, one of the greatest and most attractive characters ever thought up. What?
Alright, I'm not doing that bit for the entire video. But yes, Sonic the Hedgehog, a man who needs no introduction. Okay, not a man, an alien, but you get it. At the height of the console wars in the late 80s, Sega needed a competitor for Nintendo's titan, Super Mario. But they hoped to stand out from your average platformer, so their team created a brand new title featuring momentum-based gameplay. And with it, a too-cool-for-school hero, blue in hue with a need for speed and disdain for greed. Hand to God, I did not mean to rhyme that many times. Unless you liked it. Then bam! Sonic the Hedgehog made his debut on the Mega Drive in '91 and the rest is history. When I was but a wee lad in summer camp in 2005, whenever my buddies and I had computer lab time, we'd fire up the PC port of Sonic the Hedgehog 2 on every computer and would race each other to see who could make it furthest in the game. My record back then was Chemical Plant Zone Act 2. From the 90s to now, this azure speed demon has spawned quite the legacy for himself. One with big ups, staggering downs, and whatever the heck this was. Regardless, it's been one heck of a ride. And from the thriving game series, tons of comics, snack tie-ins, mountains of merch, television cartoons, and of course a rabid fan base would materialize. But what generation-spanning beloved game franchise will be complete without a movie adaptation? You know what? I'll shut up. Personally, I feel like Sonic's an outlier from the many other video game movie adaptations. And for good reason. With 2 already under its belt, a mini-series, and a 3rd film premiering later this month, I'd say the Sonic fan base is eating pretty darn good this crimin. So before Sonic 3 absolutely sweeps the Oscars, let's take a stroll down memory lane and see just where this all began. There's been talk of bringing Sonic and his world to the big screen since the original trilogy on the Genesis, but none of them ever materialized beyond their initial pitches and maybe some concept art. But you know Hollywood. Flash forward to 2014. Sony Pictures announced they'd be making a live-action CGI Sonic film, and fans all over the world proudly proclaimed, "Ugh." Why? Well, let me take you back a ways to the late 2000s and early 2010s. Whenever you heard an old cartoon or comic you grew up loving was getting a live-action animated film, you kinda knew what to expect. Think Alvin and the Chipmunks, Underdog, Garfield, the list is scarily long. They all tend to hit the same beats. Celebrity voices, an overabundance of pop culture and or fart jokes. The attempts to modernize these timeless characters were desperate at best and absolutely pandering at worst. Remember the time the Smurfs rapped and played Guitar Hero? So understandably, the initial announcement for a live-action Sonic movie was met with a wave of mockery. But no one full-on rejected the idea quite yet. It would be a joint production between Sony, Marza Animation Planet, and Sega Sammy Holdings in Japan. Now hearing that Sega Sammy and Marza were attached to the project gave people some hope. They produced a ton of CG cinematics for the Sonic games, one of note being the opening to Sonic Unleashed. The game itself was so-so, but every fan agrees that this opening cutscene was badass. Soon they bring in Blur Studios' Tim Miller to produce the movie, and Jeff Fowler to help develop and direct the movie. Fowler's no stranger to the Sonic IP, having directed cutscenes for Sonic 06 and the Shadow the Hedgehog game. Remember this for later. Somewhere in development, Sony dropped the project and Paramount picked it back up, along with the entire production team. In 2018, casting announcements began, with James Marsden playing a small-town cop, Tika Sumpter playing his wife Maddie, and the incomparable Jim Carrey as Dr. Robotnik. For a lot of people, he alone was the deal closer. He definitely matched the manic energy and quick wit of the original character. This goodwill wouldn't last long, however. When it came to the hog of the hour himself, Ben Schwartz was announced as the new voice for Sonic. Not a bad idea, yeah? He's got a few voice roles under his belt, and he's got the natural tune and charisma of Sonic down packed. In fact, he was originally brought on to be a temp voice, but Fowler liked it so much he ended up getting the role. What really worried people was, well, what was Sonic gonna look like? This was a live-action CGI hybrid, and those movies have an awful track record when it comes to bringing these stylized characters into the real world. For some bizarre reason, executives feel they have to make the characters look as plausible to our reality as possible. Not only does this practice show a complete lack of faith in the source material, but the end product is often lame, nightmare fuel, or a bit of both. With the only exception, inarguably, being Detective Pikachu, which yes, gave all the Pokemon real realistic textures and whatnot, but they kept their designs intact. Some of them definitely crossed into the uncanny valley, but on the whole, it was an amazing transition into live action. And dissimilar to the live action animated films of yore, this was a Pokemon movie in the Pokemon world. That alone deserves some praise. I mean, come on. As for old Sonic... Wrong. From Jump Street, they hadn't a clue. With the build of an Olympian gymnast, name brand sneakers, and separated eyes, one would assume the design team went out of their way to make Sonic look nothing like Sonic. This first look was instantly torn to shreds, but as you all may remember, nothing quite compared to the reception after seeing this thing in motion.
Gotta go fast.
It was legendary. The haterade flowed like wine. Of course, Sonic fans wanted nothing to do with this, but the general public rejected it. The World Wide Web at large. And let me tell you, back then, I was in complete denial. I saw it and told myself, I expected way worse. Brothers and sisters, you could travel all the way to Egypt and you'd never find denial like that. He looked like a mutated Who. He looked like a damn Fursona. He looked like a flaccid Augie Aardvark.
And if you don't know, now you know.
Bottom line, the design was universally hated and the movie's fate was sealed. Any goodwill they may have had initially was blipped out of existence. People would have definitely gone to see it, but before long, it'd be up and discarded to the ever-growing pile of live-action CGI hellspawn. Nothing more than a cash grab. Just low-hanging fruit to keep your kids quiet, where the title character people came to see is merely a sidekick to the celebrity character. It's a tale as old as time. But this tale had an unexpectedly happy ending. I can remember where I was when it happened. I was painting a statue for a citywide art show. Yeah, I paint, hire me. I took a break to check Twitter and saw this. Thank you for the support and the criticism. The message is loud and clear. You aren't happy with the design and you want changes. It's going to happen. Everyone at Paramount and Sega are fully committed to making this character the best he can be. Hashtag Sonic movie, hashtag gotta fix fast. I was completely beside myself. The film crew listened to the fans? The studio listened to the fans? It was a Christmas miracle. Paramount, Sega, and director Jeff Fowler were delaying the movie to fix Sonic's design, even going the extra mile in having Sonic's messiah himself, Tyson Hesse, lead the redesign. What a power move. The entire process took an additional 5 months and cost $5 million. But really, I would have been patient for an entire year if they needed it. The fact that they could own up to their mistake, apologize, and go back to try and fix it showed how much they really did care about the property and the fan base. And boy howdy, what an aftermath it was. Yes, oh yes! This was Sonic, and the full film finally and officially released to the public on Valentine's Day 2020. And hey, it wasn't bad. I mean, it was nothing amazing. It fell into a lot of the familiar tropes when it came to a live-action CG hybrid, and had some fairly cringe moments. But at its core, this was a movie about the beginnings of Sonic and Robotnik's rivalry. In his youth, Sonic was cast away from his home planet to escape the wrath of the Echidna tribe, leaving his adoptive mother, Longclaw the Owl, to face the Horde alone. On our planet, years later, Sonic is set up in the small town of Green Hills, spying on the local citizens and protecting small animals. He's most fond of the town sheriff, Tom Wachowski, who dreams of becoming a real police officer in the big city. Now, you'd think his story would overtake Sonic's, but I can assure you that isn't the case. That's why I think the Sonic movie stands out from all the rest. While others feel like they come to a complete halt to focus on the celebrity and their life, Sonic finds a nice balance between both A and B plots and has them intersect early on. After a lonely game of baseball, Sonic has an emotional breakdown, causing a huge government-notifying power outage. The military arrives to Green Hills to investigate, along with tech specialist Dr. Ivo Robotnik and his assistant Agent Stone. The greatest addition to the Sonic franchise to ever come out of these movies. Oh, please make him canon to the games, Ren, please. Anyway, Sonic retreats from his cave, seeking refuge in Tom's shed, or as Sonic affectionately calls him, the Donut Lord.
Moo?
Robotnik and his tech arrive, hot on the trail. With Sonic being some extraterrestrial entity, it's Robotnik's goal to capture him and dissect him for his power. Thankfully, Tom and Sonic escape, and a wild goose road trip ensues to San Francisco to recover Sonic's teleportation rings and then get out of Dodge before things get worse. And as is customary with these road trip movies, Sonic and the Donut Lord would form an understanding, realizing they're not so different from one another, and a beautiful friendship would bloom. Elsewhere, after recovering one of Sonic's quills, Robotnik uses it to power up his tech, enough to even match Sonic's speed. After a high-speed chase around the world, they wind up back in Green Hills, where after being shot and resurrected through the power of friendship, Sonic regains his full power, attacking Robotnik's ship and launching him into deep space. In the end, Tom decides to remain in Green Hills, along with his wife, and the two invite Sonic to live with them. But elsewhere, the Mad Doctor survived, and with quill in hand, begins plotting his comeback to Earth, and by extension, revenge on that blasted hedgehog. And that was the first Sonic movie. Admittedly, a pretty safe, inoffensive take on Sonic's origins, but there was just enough in there to please fans of the games and keep general audiences happy, and introduce newbies to the world of Sonic without ever overwhelming them. Dissimilar to the Five Nights at Freddy's movie, which prioritized fans while leaving general audiences and newcomers in the dark. And as a fan myself, let me just say, I love that this movie gave a canon explanation as to why Dr. Robotnik became Dr. Eggman. Sonic dubbed Tom the Donut Lord because of his affinity to donuts. He called Maddie Pretzel Lady because she'd stretch and twist her body during yoga. And he called Robotnik Eggman because of his egg-shaped drones. Just little details like that make the film all the more wonderful. Sonic 1 is an easy 7.5 out of 10. A decent appetizer for what could be. And ended up being 2 months after a successful run in theaters, Paramount announced Sonic the Hedgehog 2 being in development, with the entire cast and crew returning, as well as a clear indication of what the movie would be about. I mean, Sonic and Tails! And I hope my appetizer analogy for the first movie worked for you, because Sonic 2 was a whole 3-course meal. Everything was ramped up by 1,000. Not only would they introduce Tails, voiced by game voice actress Colleen O'Shaughnessy, but Robotnik got a brand new, more game-accurate look. We get the Chaos Emeralds, the Death Egg Robot, Tails Tornado Plane, Ice Cap Zone from Sonic 3, Labyrinth Zone from Sonic 1, and in an unexpected move, Idris Elba joins the voice cast as Knuckles the Echidna. They threw everything and the kitchen sink into this one, which just felt right. After earning the trust of the studio and the fans, they've got every right to go all in on game lore. And they must have pleased the studio a little too much, cause before Sonic 2 was released, a third Sonic movie and a Knuckles TV spin-off got announced. Yes sir, Sonic 3 and Knuckles, go off Jeff. Anyways, we catch up with Robotnik stranded on the Mushroom Planet, putting the finishing touches on some sort of beacon and shooting a signal out into space. 3 bounty hunters arrive to his location and are quickly pulverized by a series of traps, while Robotnik tries to make a getaway. He's intercepted by Knuckles, who is, coincidentally, hunting down Sonic. Robotnik agrees to show him the way in exchange for a lift back to Earth. Meanwhile on Earth, Sonic grows tired of his domestic living and aspires to be a hero, while Tom urges him to wait for that moment to find him and just enjoy growing up. Tom and Maddie then head off to Hawaii for Maddie's sister's wedding, leaving Sonic as man of the house. Little does he know, you know who's back on the warpath to Earth, with a little extra muscle. Knuckles reveals he's been looking for Sonic as he's the key to finding the long-lost Master Emerald. The conflict is interrupted by Tails, and the two escape to Wade's garage. Oh, that's right, I forgot. Wade Whipple is Tom's bumbling sidekick. He was present in the first movie. I simply chose to leave him out of my quick review because, well, he really wasn't that important to the story. But boy, he'll be relevant later. A hologram of Longclaw spawns from Sonic's star map to tell Sonic that Earth was the hiding place for the Master Emerald. So he and his new friend Tails realize they gotta find it before Knuckles and Robotnik. All the while, Wade spouts off his incredibly funny and memorable one-liners.
Like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man from Ghostbusters.
So is that your dad?
What?
A woman who's not my mom. You know, I knew a kid in middle school named Knuckles. Could fit his whole
Kid,
face
can you leave? Leave us alone, dog!
The quest begins in Siberia. Due to a heavy storm, they take refuge in a mountainside bar, where Tails reveals that he discovered Sonic from the powerful shockwave he released back at the ball field, and he's been watching him ever since. The bar patrons soon discover they're freaks and prepare to throw them into the fire, until Tails challenges them to a pavanka, a dance-off. And if I may be so bold as to nerd out here,
The song they danced to should have been Smooth Criminal by Michael Jackson. I mean, think about it. It would have been a nice inside reference to MJ's involvement while scoring the original Sonic the Hedgehog 3 video game, plus an inside reference to the Moonwalker video game, released on the Genesis.
Okay, nerd out period over. While the scene indeed felt tropey, it resulted in a nice bonding moment for Sonic and Tails. The next morning, the two... Oh no! The two fly into the mountains, coming across a long abandoned cave, with wall inscriptions detailing the ancient feud between the Echidna tribe and the Owls, how the Master Emerald was forged from the 7 Chaos Emeralds, and with its power, the holder would become invincible. The Owls would take the emerald and hide it away, thus the war began. Further on into the cave, Sonic and Tails would uncover a compass, which would help locate the whereabouts of the emerald. Their discovery is of course interrupted by Robotnik and Knuckles, and a chase down the mountains begins. After a pseudo heart-to-heart between Sonic and Knuckles about their loss, Robotnik steals the compass, knocks out Tails, and he and Knuckles abandon Sonic to deal with an oncoming avalanche. Having lost his rings in the downhill derby, Sonic calls Tom at the wedding to use the ring Sonic gave him earlier to save him and Tails from the avalanche. Tom does so, putting Sonic out of harm's way, but placing him in captivity of a government agency called Gun, who staged the wedding in hopes of somehow luring Sonic out of hiding. Sonic, Tails, and Tom are taken into holding, so it's up to Maddie, her sister Rachel, and the gadgets Tails left behind to rescue them, leading into the infamous 3-minute-long sequence where Rachel attacks her fiancé Randall. Robotnik and Knuckles find the temple holding the Master Emerald. Sonic, wrecked with guilt over Tails getting hurt, decides to dash across the ocean to the temple alone. Just in the nick of time, he arrives, and he and Knuckles engage in combat. During the ruckus, Robotnik sneaks over to the Emerald, revealing to Knuckles that he was a means to an end, and with the Emerald's power, abandons the two in the now decaying temple. They work together to make it out and back to the island before the temple fully sinks, and there, they have a moment to just talk it out. With their differences put aside, they team up to defeat Robotnik once and for all, just as Tails flies in for a rescue. Robotnik arrives back in Green Hills, and with the power of the Emerald, begins taking every vehicle and structure apart, building something massive.
He's taking everything apart.
He's building something.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Sonic and the gang return to find a looming Death Egg robot overlooking the town of Green Hills. And here, an epic final battle commences. With the idea that Robotnik truly cares the most about destroying Sonic, the three split up to take him down one at a time. After a lengthy tussle, a weakened Sonic attempts to take back the Emerald with an angry mech not too far behind. Before being crushed, Sonic is rescued by Tom and Maddie until they're stopped and trapped in a ring of fire. The Master Emerald crumbles in Sonic's hand and all hope seems lost. Tom and Maddie then embrace Sonic, refusing to leave his side, and they all accept their fate. Until...
The power of love activates the separated Chaos Emeralds, transforming Sonic into Super Sonic. With enhanced super speed and strength, Sonic demolishes the Death Egg and sends Robotnik falling to his doom.
After summoning a well-deserved chili dog, Sonic releases the emeralds back into the universe, realizing he's not ready to take on the responsibilities of a hero, and would rather enjoy the simple life while he has it. Knuckles reforms the Master Emerald, and he, Sonic, and Tails make a vow to use their special powers to keep the universe safe, protect the Master Emerald from any negative forces, and to have each other's backs. Thus, Team Sonic was born. Sonic's finally set with everything he's ever wanted. A loving family, new friends, and a place to belong. And the game of baseball they all play later on beautifully shows that. Think back to the first movie, when he would play every position himself, cheer himself on. Look at the hopelessness in his face when he stops and realizes.
I really am alone.
And look at him now. The gang heads off for some victory ice cream and the movie ends. Sonic 2, everyone. On all accounts, far better than the first. And while the first movie wasn't bad, it wasn't a Sonic film, you know? This one had so much more adventure and more of the characters and world we know and love. In fact, there's another stinger at the end of the movie, revealing what the next chapter holds. And it's nothing short of legendary.
My God. Project Shadow.
My theater didn't have to wait for Shadow to start screaming. The line 50 years later set people off. Like, dude, the Sonic cinematic universe is upon us. Bottom line, the movie was damn near perfect. All except that wedding scene. Not the entire scene, mind you, just the last 3 minutes. If I had to nitpick anywhere else, I can think of a few moments where the effects look kinda poo-poo. Seriously, this right here is YouTube levels of bad green screen. But apart from those small moments, Sonic 2 is a Sonic movie through and through. And while I've seen a few unfairly harsh reviews, the overall reception's been pretty positive. And by the end of its run in theaters, it was considered the highest grossing video game film in the US. Well, until...
It's a me. Mario.
Regardless, Sonic 2 is an easy 9 out of 10. Yes sir, Jeff Fowler and crew were making Sonic cool again, and with the third installment on the horizon, they show no signs of stop. In all my excitement, I forgot I have to discuss the Knuckles series, which, as you can tell by my vocal pitch, I am ecstatic about. I'll try my best to keep this as brief as possible. The Knuckles series was meant to be a bridge between the second and third movies, following Knuckles taking Green Hill's own Wade Whipple under his wing and teaching him in the ways of the Echidna warrior. Seems like a simple enough premise, and a great opportunity to develop this iteration of Knuckles, who instantly became a fan favorite after Sonic 2. Only problem is, this show really isn't about Knuckles. The quickest way I can describe the show is, well, Sonic 1, but worse. Imagine we were in the bad timeline. That original Sonic movie came out and it was all about Tom, his struggles, his family, his whatever, and Sonic appeared some of the time. Like, even Robotnik barely gets any shine. The Knuckles show is like that, except it's not Tom and Sonic. It's Wade and Knuckles and they should have just called it Wade and Knuckles. That's what the show really wants to be about. Knuckles is an afterthought most of the time. The most we get about anything Knuckles is in episode 4, where Wade takes part in a trippy, low-budget rock opera about Knuckles' life. And people want to swear up and down that this is the worst episode in the series, because Knuckles only shows up at the start and at the very end. And I understand that, but the entire rock opera dream sequence thing is about Knuckles. Would I have rather seen it done with Knuckles? Yeah. Was the Facebook Marketplace reference dumb? You bet. But episode 4 delivered more Knuckles lore than any of the other 5. That being said, the rest of the show was incredibly underwhelming. Rightfully so, as each episode was written and directed by different people. Jeff Fowler directed episode 1, which by default made it the best episode, but Pat Casey and Josh Miller, the writers of the movies, weren't brought onto the project. On some level, I can respect the vision of producer Toby Asher, who wanted to create a wild card buddy comedy in the style of 90s sports films like Happy Gilmore and The Big Lebowski. But this is not the way to do it. Wade isn't that endearing of a character. He can provide a decent laugh every now and again, and his man-child demeanor can even be charming. But he's best served in small doses. He's strictly the comic relief for a reason. Unless they showed us a different side of him separate from the ditzy sidekick cop we know him as, making him the star wasn't ever going to pan out. Alright, I'm talking about Knuckles far longer than I wanted to. So here's a quick rundown of everything else I hated about the show. Ahem. Knuckles would disappear for large chunks of the episode. Like, even when he's present in the room, just off screen, we gotta focus on Wade. Chief Pachacamac shows up and he's voiced by Christopher Lloyd, and he's literally just playing Christopher Lloyd. Why would this long-dead, ancient tribal leader know who the Mets are or what rock opera was? The Rogue Gun agents and the Buyer take the cake as the lamest villains in TV history and Sonic history. The final showdown between Knuckles and the Buyer was boring, but the soundtrack they used for it was pretty awesome.
Hey, wait a minute, you cheated!
The entirety of the bowling tournament where Knuckles was barely involved. And last but not least, the biggest issue about the Knuckles series was Wanda Whipple. I do have to pay my respects to Paramount though. You've done it. You've actually created the most hated human character since Chris Thorndike. Amazing. Anyways, 4.5 out of 10. Every time Knuckles is on screen, the show's awesome. Oh, and apart from some throwaway line about an alien being at another bowling tournament back in the 70s, there's no setup for Sonic 3. You could skip over the show and you wouldn't miss a thing. Speaking of which... At the time of recording, we've got about a week until the premiere of Sonic 3, and I couldn't be more hyped. Here's the long and short of what we know. After 50 years in suspended animation, Shadow the Hedgehog reawakens and is ready to destroy humanity all in the name of all he's lost. He's such a powerful foe that Team Sonic goes looking for Robotnik and Stone for an assist. Their alliance has a purpose, but the partnership is only temporary. Somewhere along the way, Robotnik discovers his long-lost grandfather, Gerald Robotnik, and the two team up for their own nefarious purposes. This frickin' movie, man. I'm so pumped I am close to puking my guts. As with every Sonic film, it pulls inspiration from a few areas. This one pulling from Sonic Adventure 2, and of course, the Shadow the Hedgehog game. As mentioned previously, Jeff Fowler worked on that game as director and animator on the cutscenes. I can only imagine how ecstatic he is right now. He's got an intimate history with the character, and from everything we've shown, seems to be doing him justice. But the character will only be as convincing and endearing as his voice. And Lord knows they weren't gonna get Jason Griffith back. If they were gonna recast someone as popular as Shadow, it had to be done right. The popular choice amongst fans was Keanu Reeves. While I scoffed at the notion, there was no way in Hilltop Zone they'd get someone as big as Keanu Reeves in a Sonic movie. So, joining Ben, Colleen, and Idris in the booth ended up being none other than...
You're a colorful bunch. Finally, we will have our revenge. The more you talk, the harder I want to hit you.
Jeff, brand me as yours. I'm still in shock. A whole month later, I still can't believe John Wick himself is Shadow the Hedgehog. Keanu, you are a national treasure. This movie. If Jim Carrey was willing to rescind his comments on retiring for this movie, we're in for some good. Just know, I'll be firmly planted in my seat, Sprite in one hand on the 20th to find out. And if y'all want, I may review the movie. But before I give my closing statements, I must discuss a theory I have about old Gerald. Gerald isn't Gerald, but is, in fact, Ivo, our Robotnik. From the future. I mean, most fans would agree that the third movie may be the one where they introduce time travel, which would be a perfect segue into introducing the next big bad if Jim Carrey decides to retire. Metal Sonic. Or I don't know, I could be totally wrong, just thinking out loud here. In closing, the epic chronicle that is the Sonic film series has been a bizarre one for sure, but I'm sure loving every minute of it. From its rough start to now, it's been great seeing such a powerful resurgence in a long-beloved franchise. One people were losing hope for. With miss after miss after miss, Sonic became a laughingstock, and it was hard to watch. Until the movie happened. Well, until Paramount redesigned that homunculus, and it's worked out in everyone's favor. Paramount has a potential blockbuster franchise, and Sega's got the public excited about Sonic again. Yes, sir, Jeff Fowler and crew made Sonic cool again. And with the third installment on the horizon, they show no signs of stopping. And there's a lot more of this franchise coming. Google that on your own time. If you made it to the end of the video, I really appreciate you. What do you think of the Sonic movies so far? Head on down to the comment section and let me know. Or if you just want to call me names and tell me I'm annoying, I won't stop you from doing that either. Please like the video and subscribe for more cool things to come. More movie discussions, more of this, definitely more of these. Until we meet again, friend.